Alina? Okay.
Hi, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, time to get started. I'm Nancy Langton, Associate Dean of Accreditation and Strategic Initiatives at the Lewis College of Business, Brad D. Smith Schools of Business at Marshall University. I'm excited to be with you today. Welcome to the Herd Insight Small Business Webinar Series. We thank you for taking the time to attend this event. It's the second webinar this year in a series given by the Lewis College of Business faculty and local business professionals. The series showcases the combined expertise of our best faculty and seasoned and knowledgeable practitioners from the business community in which we engage. The goal of the series is to help small businesses achieve success in a changing and dynamic business environment. Before we start the event today, I'd like to introduce Avi Mukherjee, Dean of the Lewis College of Business, Brad D. Smith Schools of Business, who will say a few words about the college and its mission.
Thank you, Nancy, and welcome everyone to this exciting event. We appreciate your interest in the Hard Business Insights Small Business Webinar Series. The mission of the Lewis College of Business and its Brad D. Smith Schools of Business is to promote economic development in the regional community and beyond. We do this by implementing our strategic priorities for external engagement and economic development, including lifelong learning programs, the Business and Economics Research Symposium, the Dean's Distinguished Speaker Series, and the CEO panel that many of you attended in the past. The college also has outreach centers, including the Center for Entrepreneurship and Business Innovation, or the I-Center, that helps small businesses innovate with a focus on design thinking techniques, and the BB&T Center for Leadership that promotes consulting and research projects between students and community. The college also cooperates with the Brad D. Smith Business Incubator to help promote entrepreneurship throughout the region. As the nation is ready to start rebuilding businesses and economies coming out of the pandemic closures and lockdown, the Lewis College of Business is committed to supporting our local businesses, alumni, and other stakeholders in re-engaging, recharging, and redesigning their business models. Hence, we have developed this webinar series that will consist of presentations throughout the year and approximately every 2 weeks. We hope that you enjoy today's presentation and take something out of it to use in your business or professional activities to make West Virginia and the surrounding area a better place for business and community engagement. Nancy Langton will now introduce today's speakers.
Thanks, Avi. Today's informative and engaging presentation is titled Competing on Analytics, a Roadmap to Creating Business Intelligence. It is brought to you by Jingren Zhang and Sky Raymond. Jingren is an assistant professor of management here in the college. She holds a PhD in industrial engineering with a focus on data analytics, intelligent supply chain and retailing, and operations or optimization. Jingren has publications on inventory flow management in top journals. Sky is a senior data scientist at Terbium Labs. She has 7 years of experience implementing data science processes for manufacturers. She is a data science consultant to the National Prescription Opioid Litigation and is a regular contributor to the podcast Data in Depth. Jingren and Sky will discuss what it means to be an analytical competitor, how to evaluate your company's current analytical maturity, and how to create business intelligence using your data. Please feel free to ask questions via the chat function throughout the presentation. Jingren and Sky will answer these questions at the end. I now turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you. Thanks for the warm welcome and the introduction from Dean Arvi and Dean Nancy. And me and Sky, we appreciate this opportunity here to share, some of our thoughts and how we deal with data analytics with all of you here. So as Nancy introduced, Sky and me are both from like math or like engineering background. Then, following by that, we're working in the operations and analytics area. So when Sky and me started to, come up with an idea, we had some discussion like, why not talking about something we both work on, right? So that's where this topic come to our mind. So our topic here, competing on analytics, a roadmap to creating business intelligence. So us two will go through this topic based on actually 4 questions. So I will introduce the background and what does it mean to like compete on analytics. And then I will switch to Sky. She's gonna talk in detail based on her experience working with a company to tell like how can we use the data to compete on analytics. So let's start to dive into the analytics. So first, it's very important to understand, how we have gotten to the point where the data-driven operations are possible. Actually, now we are in the middle of a time period being called, the fourth industrial revolution, right? So sometimes I call it like industry 4.0. So we know actually it's a fancy way to say that we now have more things connected to the data, connected to the internet than ever before, and we have access to more data. And also like new technologies, they are constantly generating, collecting, and storing the data for people to use. So like the previous industrial revolutions that came before this one, so the fourth industrial revolution is actually fundamentally changing the way we do business and impacting every business sector. So the biggest advantage of the fourth industrial revolution is that we have access to vast amount of data, like what we mentioned in the previous slides. So this allow the businesses to compete in ways that, before you will think is impossible. So in the past, companies, have looked to, let's say like price or speed or quality to gain some advantage, right, over the competition. But because of the widely available technology, now competing on these trees alone, only on like any of these 3 trees, now actually is becoming very, very difficult. So let's say competing on a price scale, competing on the price, it actually kills the profit margin in a lot of cases, right? And sometimes it can hurt the brand by lessening like the product's perceived value. Then we think about the speed. The local retailers always have like competitive advantage over their like local populations. So now, if you think about that, we almost have the 2-day shipping available with most like the online retailers, right? No matter where you live and what you buy. So also a lot of chain retailers like Walmart, they start to use their physical stores to fulfill their online orders. So which like speed up the whole process as well. So also for groceries, for things like books and movies, they are all on demand with the internet connection. So new technology has allowed the speed to become less of a differentiator, but of course it doesn't mean it's not important here, but it's like more of an expectation now for the customers, right? And the third one is what we said, the quality, right? So quality is one of the most significant objective, or we say the performance trait in recent decades. So, but one thing is like most of the cases, it's very easy to replicate for companies who sell the same product or service. So one example could be, think about the difference between Uber and Lyft, right? So both of them are, the shared driving service, right? So who really cares as long as you get fastest way with a reasonable price from point A to point B. We don't really care like which driver or which company we pick it up, right? Unless they have the same level of the quality. So these 3 factors alone here are less likely to provide a lasting competitive advantage in today's business environment. And also Another situation or another reason which bring to such situation is the customers. So the customer here, like what we say, we have more data. As a business owner and business runner, you have more data. Customers are getting more data as well, right? And the more the data they are using, which can help them to get a better product with a lower cost in a faster way, based on their understanding. They are making some decision as well. So in order to serve the customers with a capability that cannot be easily replicated, businesses should find ways to gain an advantage through the business intelligence. And the key here is the data, but not only the data. Like what we say, it means you need to use the data to make some smarter business decisions. So here, I want to give you guys some examples. First one is the UPS. So take it as an example, in 2012, I believe, they create a program called, the optimization and navigation program. And they are using this program to figure out the most efficient delivery routes. So what they do is like they started to use some historical data on the parcel deliveries to train a model, and then they can use the model to provide the drivers with optimal routes each day to minimize the mile it takes to deliver their packages. So actually, they benefit from such program where the program has saved the UPS like 100 million miles and 10 million gallons of fuel for a year annually. So last year, actually, UPS rolled it out an enhancement, which uses the real-time traffic data to continually update the drivers with the better route in real time. And we expected that the enhancement is going to save them more and more, right? So another example is Netflix. Netflix uses a viewer data to create a model called the Netflix recommender system. So the goal of this model is to maximize the stream time per user. And the result actually is more than 80% of the viewer activity comes from Netflix recommendations. Third one is the American Express. So American Express here, they actually use the machine learning to create models that detect the fraud. So here, this case is particularly difficult because the model here has to continually learn as fraudsters change their tactics, right? So their algorithms has found an estimate like 2 billion in potential years fraud charges. So that's very interesting story. And also, let's say like Amazon. So Amazon, they use their sales data to develop some new storage and picking strategies, and also something we call the consolidation procedures, right? While they're picking the stuff. So all of these like new strategies based on the data analytics allow them to take advantages on speed and quality competition in the online retailing. So of course, we are mentioning a lot of examples in business, right? And actually, compete on analytics works for other areas as well. Let's say for sports. And actually, this example comes when I talk with Sky, and I'm not really an expert in basketball, but Sky mentioned this example, and both of us feel it's very interesting, and we should just introduce. So. Like what I said, sport business can benefit from competing analytics as well. So this guy, you may recognize this guy, right? Better than me. Marshall's own D'Antoni. So he actually knows the value of analytics when it comes to winning basketball games. So in a 2016 post-game interview, a reporter asks the coach D'Antoni if he felt like his guys are like too many like 3-point shots and didn't really work the ball into the pen enough. So he responded like the best shot in basketball is the corner three, which average 1.3 points per attempt, right? But that working it to the forward is only like 0.78 points per attempt. And he went on to tell the average of several other shots, proving that the 3-point shot was more valuable here. And then finished with the code, which we stated on the screen. So he actually clearly understands the value of basing his offensive strategy around the analytics, like both quantitatively and qualitatively, not only based on the experience. Okay, so here I will do the switch to Sky. Welcome, Sky.
Awesome, thank you, Jingren. Okay, so all of these organizations that Jingren just mentioned can be categorized as analytical competitors, which is just an organization that uses data to execute a strategy better than their competition. These organizations have several things in common, but they have four main things in common that allow them to do this. First, their analytics supports a distinctive capability. So in your industry, what capability does your company have that you consider to be something that's unique? What is something that you're the best at? One mistake I see with a lot of companies is that they try to use analytics in too many places too quickly. Picking a distinctive capability helps you really narrow your focus, which is going to be important if you want these strategies to be successful. So that part's very important. The second trait is data management is prioritized. With most small businesses, your employees are going to be the people who are actually collecting your data and then making decisions based on those results. So it's extremely important that they take ownership in prioritizing data collection and management. Any analytics generated from bad data can be very dangerous because it can lead to false decision-making based on data that was incorrect. So the third is that they have large-scale ambitions. And this one is very important because the results from your analytics strategy need to have a significant impact on your business operations and your decision-making processes. If your efforts are too small, it won't truly provide a competitive advantage for you against your competition. And then last is senior management support and commitment. A data-driven culture has to start at the top. And so this is actually the most important characteristic of the four, because without it, the others are going to be impossible to achieve. So once you have these four traits, you are in a great position to start implementing analytics. But where do you start? And that's a really hard question. And a lot of businesses have a hard time answering this because it can get very overwhelming trying to figure out how you use your data within your current processes. And that's where a framework can really come into play and be beneficial as you're starting to plan out where you're going to implement these analytics. There are different frameworks that can be used, but the one that I prefer is to bucket efforts into these steps shown on the slide: descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. And I like this model because it's the easiest that I've found to understand and implement. So using this framework, you start with descriptive analytics, which is the analysis of your historical data. Descriptive analytics can help you understand your past performance and answer questions that tell you what has happened in your business. So this information can be things like, what are my year-to-date sales compared to last year? Or what is my warranty rate? Things that have happened in the past that you're now observing. And most businesses are already implementing descriptive analytics. Usually it's coming in the form of reports or dashboards. If your company is using KPIs, that's going to be a type of descriptive analytics. Key performance indicators, describing things that have been happening in your business. Another type of descriptive analytics are ad hoc queries. If you query your database looking for an answer to a specific question, that's going to be a type of descriptive analytic. And if you have reliable data for descriptive analytics, maybe you're viewing daily dashboards, you can then move to implementing predictive analytics. Predictive analytics are going to help you forecast what will happen, what could happen in the future. The idea here is that you're using historical data that you do have to predict future data that you don't yet have. You can answer questions like, how many units of product A should I keep in stock to meet next month's demand? Predictive analytics help you manage operations by planning for the future and minimizing risk. And really, a lot of people use predictive analytics solely to minimize their risk and plan out their things like inventory and their future purchases. This step is more difficult to implement because it requires more advanced techniques like building models. You'll hear this step called machine learning, which is just a buzzword that's used, but all that means is forecasting and creating models. Creating models does require a specific skill set from your employees or a consultant. So be aware of that before getting started. It's going to require someone technical, someone with math expertise, like a data scientist. Usually a business analyst can go in and give you really good insight with descriptive analytics. It's a completely different skill set to be able to actually model with that data. So be aware of that. It's going to require some different kinds of talent. So these models lay the foundation for prescriptive analytics, which is all about optimization. That's what you're shooting for. Prescriptive analytics use the models to create different possible outcomes. Then users can see which actions will lead to the best results. You can answer questions like, how do we change prices to maximize profit? Or how can we order parts to minimize stockouts? So you're going to take the models from predictive analytics, and that will end up giving you a bunch of variables, which is just scenarios that affect your model outcome. And in prescriptive analytics, you go in and tweak those different variables and see how they affect your prediction. So each of these steps end up building on the previous step, and understanding where your organization falls on this chart is going to help you plan the next step that you need to take to get closer and closer to optimization, which is the end goal. So putting all of this information together, the roadmap to competing on analytics is going to look something like this. First, you're going to want to secure senior management support. Nothing worthwhile can happen until you have this piece. Second, you're going to decide what part of the business you plan to use analytics to compete, and this is going to be your distinctive capability. Understanding where you are currently at with your data strategy so you can figure out where you need to go next. Then you're going to want to make sure you have clean data. If you don't, you'll be making decisions based on bad information. And this really is an organization-wide effort. You just need to be certain that every piece of data being entered from every part of your organization is clean and accurate. You're going to then have to invest. And this effort is going to take a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes different types of talent or consultants. And the process will end up being frustrating at times. But in the end, your results should really transform your business operations. And once you're ready to do all of those things, then you just have to get started. So the best way to understand this process is going to be through a real life example. We implemented this strategy at a company called Service Pump and Supply that's headquartered right here in Huntington. Service Pump was founded with the mission to solve water challenges for customers. They manufacture and distribute pumps, motors, and other products related to moving water. They sell mining, municipal, industrial, and oil and gas customers, but mining is a big part of their business. And so over the past several years, as the mining industry has become more and more unpredictable, Service Pump executives decided they wanted to implement analytics to help them make smarter business decisions. So right away, before anything could get started, they had that executive support. So to start, we utilized this process and started with defining the distinctive capability for Service Pump. This picture is from the Service Pump website, where you can see there's an obvious emphasis on service. You can see that the company motto is "We put service first," which they take very seriously. Management agreed that this was the area where the company had a distinctive capability to provide great service to their customers. So following that thought, we decided to implement analytics first in the repair shop. The repair process at Service Pump was previously very simple and straightforward, very low tech. A customer would call to schedule a pump for repair. A salesman would be sent out to pick up the pump, or the customer would drop it off. And once it would get to the shop, a repairman would diagnose the reason that the pump had failed. This could be things like a bearing failure or a torn seal, a dry run, anything to describe the reason that the pump was no longer working. So all of the data that was associated with this repair was handwritten on a piece of paper and then filed away into filing cabinets when the repair was completed. They would literally pass around with the pump this piece of paper, and everybody would add information to it as the pump went throughout the repair process. So because all this valuable data was sitting in file cabinets, they were unable to draw any sort of insight from the data that was being collected. And at this point, they really couldn't even perform the most basic descriptive analytics. So if, for example, they didn't know which pumps were failing most often, why they were failing, or how much these different types of failures were costing the customers. And if they had questions about past pump repairs, they would have to go back to those filing cabinets and look through all those files and pull, they called it a cardboard, pull the cardboard and see what had happened to the pump. So because of this inefficient process, the path forward was pretty clear. The first thing that we needed to do was get all of these records into a format where they could be easily accessed to collect the data for descriptive analytics. So in the repair shop, we underwent a bit of a digital transformation where we moved all of the data collection from 2 electronic files. So instead of being on paper, they were collected via iPad and stored as a repair record in the company's Salesforce system. And Service Pump actually already had Salesforce set up, so it made sense for us to move all that information into a system that they were already using. So we began to collect the data in this new electronic format, but we had to make sure that the data was accurate. For this new digital process to work, everyone in the company had to value clean data. The repair record had dependencies on several different departments and several different roles, where each person involved in the repair had data to add to the repair record. So for example, when the salesman went to pick up a failed pump, they created a repair record from their cell phone. That record that they created created a new record in Salesforce. When they dropped the pump off to the shop, repairmen continued to add data to that same record. Repair coordinators had to add data to this record when they ordered parts. Then the quality team would come in and add like testing data to this record. Anything to do with the pump as it went through the repair process, all of that data was added to one record. And then when the pump was ready to go back, shipping added the ship dates and pictures of the pump before they were actually sent back to the customer. The picture above is what a repair record would look like. This came from the internet. It's just a record on example of a new lead in Salesforce, but the repair record was a very similar layout. You can see that there are fields with drop downs that make data collection standard. So, they couldn't type in a primary cause of failure. They had to select one from a predefined list that they had actually created themselves. But that leads to just cleaner data so that when you're modeling, you don't have to deal with 50 types of data. You've got 10 main sources of failure that you're working with. And they could also attach notes as needed. We could fully customize this page, which was very nice. So if the repairman had, they wanted to add something to this record, it was very easy to go in and add and start collecting new sources of data. Getting employee support on this was not an easy task. A lot of these guys had been using the same process for 20 years, and they really didn't want to make changes or feel like they're being tracked, which is something I hear a lot from small businesses who are just starting. Their employees are feeling like they're being tracked, which is not the intent of this. It's just to collect data to gain that intelligence. So this took a lot of work. The trick to really getting the employees on board with these strategies are to, one, let the employees see how this can benefit them and make their job easier. And then two, give them ownership in the process. take their suggestions on things they would like to change, and then do your best to make that happen with the technology. When we went through this, I actually spent 2 weeks in the repair shop with the repairmen, just getting to know their processes, how they collected the data, what their pain points were. That was a really, that was something that was really helpful for me, was to be able to see which parts of their jobs they didn't enjoy as much, and then try to help them fix that. And doing that, it was a lot easier to get them on board with the data management. The results aren't going to happen overnight, but eventually the guys in the repair shop came to think that this process was much easier than what they had been doing, and they were really happy with the results. And they also had a feel of ownership over it, because they had been so involved in how we created this process. So this analytics initiative really changed everything about the way pump repairs were completed. Every pump repair station was set up with new iPads and monitors for data collection and easy display. You can see in the picture, this is a pump repairman working from an iPad, and this TV in the background has what's called a pump breakdown on it, and it's just where repairmen can go in and see the different parts of the pump they're working on. And this one is being controlled by the iPad where he's standing. Previously, these pump breakdowns were on paper, and they were very hard to read. But now salesmen had the ability to blow up the picture and see small details about the pump. And that was one of those pain points that I was talking about earlier. One of the big complaints that I got were that the pump breakdowns were very hard to read. They got dirty because they were just paper, so they were passed around quite often. But they really liked this ability to go in and use the iPad for this piece of their work. They could also put dashboards up on this screen, and these would show them what pump repairs they had in their queue, so they could better prepare and stay on top of the backlog of pumps. So new Salesforce functionality was created specifically for the repair process. Every employee had to be trained on how to fill out new repair records and how to search for customer information. Old records needed transferred into the new system. They were currently sitting in those file cabinets. And so that's a very manual process to go in and push everything over into a new system. We hired interns for that. The pump repair process was completely restructured to enable better and more accurate data collection. This was a really big investment of resources and time. And the larger scale ambition was there. There were this entire process, just getting to the point where we could start collecting data in a clean way, probably took about a year. So it will take a bit of time to get to this point. So when the changes were made, we went back to our framework, and we could now analyze the historical pump data to see why the pumps were failing. It helped us to understand our quality and find bottlenecks in the repair process. One thing that we did that was very impactful was to measure the amount of time the pump sat in each stage of the repair. We could see which stages were taking too long and figure out how to fix that using the data. So as the pump would go throughout the shop, there was a triage station up front, and the pump would come. That was a stopping point. Then the pump would be delegated to one of the pump repairman stations. So it would go there and join a backlog. Then it needed to be quality tested, and sometimes that took some time. Parts needed to be ordered, which takes time. The pump had to be put back together. And so all of these different stages, all of these stopping points, we timed how long, how many days, how many hours it took for the pump to kind of work its way through that process. And we ended up finding that the repair slowed down most often when the parts had to be ordered to fix the pump. And this was really slowing down the turnaround time to get the pump back to the customers. So we use this information as the basis for our predictive analytics. And we decided to forecast which pump parts were going to be needed for repairs before the pump even got into the shop. This way we could have the parts already on order and have them ready when the pump got into the shop. We could also better predict pump lifetime. So we knew when the customer pumps were going to be most likely to fail, and prepare them for those to come into the shop as well. And this is where Service Pump is at currently. They're implementing these steps. You can see this descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics, some of the questions that they're able to now answer that they couldn't previously answer. Prescriptive analytics is going to be the next step. And again, this is all around optimization. So you'll see a lot of words like minimize and maximize when you're thinking about prescriptive analytics. An example, from the slide, how can we minimize repair turnaround time? How can we maximize profit on each repair? And how can we minimize warranty requests? And those things, once you create models in those separate areas, you can use prescriptive analytics to actually start optimizing. So that's the next steps for Service Pump, is really driving towards that optimization. So this is now something that's on the Service Pump website. They actually provide customers with a preventative maintenance program and an in-depth analysis of their pump repairs. They create quarterly reporting packets for their customers that has information on how they can save money on their pump repairs, and then insight into why their pumps are failing. If there are preventable failures, which is a failure of a pump due to a lack of understanding on how to operate it, then Service Pump can recommend training to help minimize those failures. And that happens quite often. The employees actually placing the pump in sometimes don't have the proper training or do it incorrectly. And those can be very costly failures when they come back to Service Pump to be repaired. And so customers are extremely appreciative when we can find ways to prevent those kinds of failures with some additional training. So using the framework, Service Pump was really able to go from a point where they were using paper records, they had no insight whatsoever into their repair data, to using their repair data as a competitive advantage and an industry differentiator. There was nobody else in the business at the time that was doing this. There still might not be. And the customers really appreciated that they took the time to use their data to help the customer save money. And so this has turned into a big competitive differentiator for Service Pump. And that's all I've got. Nancy, I'm not sure if you have questions.
Yes, thanks, Sky and Jingren. This has been a very interesting presentation. It will help us all think more about how small businesses can compete using data analytics. I will read some questions now that came through via the chat function, and some additional ones that were sent before the presentation. The first question I have is, might you suggest several approaches or strategies to secure support of top management? How would an analyst get on the agenda of top management?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you don't have that, we got lucky with Service Pump because we had that initial support. It was actually driven by top management. As an analyst, it's much harder to kind of get that eye of senior support. So what I would suggest for that is to start with small areas where you can prove good results. And so maybe it's something where you have a dashboard that's giving you some sort of information, maybe on your inventory, and using small proven, go in and run an analysis. If you have a data scientist, that's great. Maybe you could prove with predictive analytics, hey, we had a stock out of this product this month, but this model that we created kind of quickly, it has proven results. It could have caught this. So maybe that's a place that we should start looking to actually implement a big analytics project. Another thing, like specifically for Service Pump, when it was pretty obvious that the repairman had really bad pain points, I pointed out where it was hard for them to read those pump breakdowns, but there were several pain points for them. They got customer complaints pretty much constantly about, sometimes on turnaround time. And then the other thing was it was very hard for them to have to go back and find those files. So we started kind of tracking how much time it took for them to actually find those files. And you can make a pretty solid argument once you realize how much inefficiencies there actually are. So measuring the inefficiencies is something that I would say is also important, because then you actually have proof that you need to apply analytics in certain areas.
Okay, great. Another question is, what are some common mistakes you see when businesses implement an analytical strategy?
One of the biggest mistakes that I see is that they try to start too big too fast. Um, it's you need to start small and then expand, and that's why it's so important to really start in that distinctive capability that you feel that you have. Most of the time, the data within that sector of your business is going to be cleaner than other parts because you really pride yourself on that distinctive capability. So a lot of times the data there is going to be the best quality data that you have. Starting there, and then once you can kind of prove out your theory that using these analytics are going to be a strategy that works for us, and then expanding it to other parts of your business, that's going to be much more helpful than if you just start and say, okay, today I want to have an inventory prediction model, and I also want to do the repair process, and I also want to look at quality control. If you can kind of do one initiative at a time and do them really well, that's going to be the best way to implement the strategy. And then the other thing that I see constantly and is very important is your data collection process. And what I mean by that is there are times where you kick off this initiative, and the employees are focused on it, management's focused on it. They really collect good data for the first 2 or 3 months. And it's just because, all eyes are on that process. And as you kind of settle back into a flow where maybe you're not checking on the data as often, it's easy to kind of fall back into those old practices on data collection. And so, with Service Pump, we used iPads for this to ensure that data collection was going to be standardized, not just for the first 3 months, but moving forward into the next, several years. And so you need to find a way to get consistently clean data. And a lot of times that's going to end up being like re-engineering your processes in a way that you help your employees continue to collect clean data.
Thanks. Another question, and you talked about this a little bit already, is how do I get employees to buy in and support analytics initiatives?
Yeah, that's most of the when an employer is hesitant to implement this, it's mostly because they feel like it wouldn't work with their employees, like they wouldn't like it, they wouldn't use it, things like that. There are several things you can do. Like I said, the most important thing that I found is let them take some ownership of the process. It's not going to work if you just bring somebody in, maybe a data science consultant, and they come and look at the process and they just completely throw out everything you've been doing for the past 20 years with the repairman having no say or your employees having no say whatsoever in changing that process. They're going to be the experts at what they do. And so, that having them more involved helps in 2 ways. One, it helps them feel ownership, but 2, it actually is better business, is going to be a better business decision, because most of the time they actually have extremely valuable information that a data scientist is just never going to know. It's kind of marrying those 2 things, the experience and the data science knowledge. Once you marry those, that's when you're going to have the biggest business impact. And so, that's one way. Allow them ownership. And then some of the other things you can do, introduce it slowly and in steps. First introduce maybe a small change in your data collection, and then introduce some sort of decision-making change, meaning you get in this information from the data, we're going to start showing this to you so that you can use it to make decisions. And then maybe after that, you work towards optimization. So introducing these big projects to them in small chunks is going to make it much easier to swallow than just all of a sudden rolling out this huge analytics initiative and then being kind of taken off guard by it and having to digest it all at once. It's very hard. It's very hard for anybody. So I would say that as well, just introducing it in kind of small chunks. And just finding ways that they can use it to make their jobs easier.
Yeah, just one adding to Sky. I feel like, it's a similar thing to, when we talk about the first question, how to secure by the top management as well, right? So I believe there's one more big problem sometimes. It's like the people who are working on the position now, they probably do not really have like an idea what analytics are. So it feels like once we be introduced by like some analytics things, we need to make decision based on that. Then like I do not really have any like knowledge based on that. Then what should I do? So I believe one more thing is to introduce with them for the tools, how to pick the tool. That's also important. The analytics tools you're applying. So if it is clear, if it is easy to handle, right, then that will be a good start to introduce them into data analytics. That's one more thing I want to add to Sky.
Okay, great. I think this question is also for Jingren. What do you think? A lot of small businesses may feel like they're never going to be able to compete with those larger companies in terms of data analytics, either because they don't want to start analytics or they think they'll just always be behind. So what do you think's their solution to this?
Yeah, actually, the previous couple questions, we also point that out a little bit, right? So the thing is, once we mention like data analytics, people think that will be a huge like story or be like with like a lot of the difficult coding stuff. But actually, data analytics means you have data and you're using the data to make decisions. So with small business, again, like what Sky mentioned, they can start with a small thing. They can start to collect some data and start to observe something based on the data. And then by using these decisions to make like more advanced stuff. So one example I can come up with is, let's say, I believe, especially, now people are doing online shopping a lot, right? So we just buy a lot of stuff online, right? So the thing is like, then how the small retailers how can they compete with the huge retailers, let's say like Amazon? So I would say now they can make some decision based on, let's say, am I going to do my own online stuff? Can I just like operate an online channel and I can just, let's say sell them and just ship them by myself? Or can I use some sort of like third-party service to just, let them store my product, let them sell my product, and I will just compare these two options. This is data analytics as well, right? You are analyzing your decision as well. So I believe these are some small problems you can start working on, and then select whatever, because you are small, then which means you have more services you are able to apply. So you have more tools you're able to apply because it will be very easy for you sometimes to implement some type of new things compared with some huge traditional companies, right? So that's probably one suggestion I can come up with. What about Sky?
Yeah, I agree with you, Jingren. I would actually, in some cases, argue that it's actually more simple for the smaller businesses to implement this type of stuff. I've seen with bigger companies, sometimes they have 10 different ERP systems, and they're working across several different countries and things like that. And when you have that happen, it's much more difficult to get all of the data standardized so that you can use it. And then they have mergers and acquisitions and things, and now you're having to completely retrain your models because you have this whole new data source. Whereas with a smaller company, they usually have maybe an ERP system and a CRM system. It's much more easy to control your data, and it's much easier to continue to do quality checks, things like that. It's easier to train your employees how to use it. You're probably dealing with 50 employees instead of 100,000. And so those controls are going to make it more simple for you to, and it's still difficult, right? This is a difficult process, but it will make it more simple than having to roll it out over some huge organization.
Nancy, you mute yourself.
Gotcha. Sorry about that. Another question has come through about the technologies. The question says, what are some analytics technologies that small businesses can use?
You want to start, Sky?
Yeah, I can start with that. I like, I find that things like Salesforce, I'm a big pusher of Salesforce because I just think it's a great platform. But those things are really convenient to use because they're so easy to customize. So anytime that you want to just start collecting data in a certain area of your business where maybe you've never collected data before, it's very easy to go in and create the technology required to store that information. The other thing that I like about platforms like Salesforce or really any cloud-based system is that you can, Salesforce specifically has what's called an app exchange, where it's very much like your cell phone. You can go in and download apps that people have created, pre-created already, so you don't have to do the custom work there. You just download the app into your system, and now you have the tech foundation that you need to start implementing analytics. Salesforce also has rolled out a functionality called Salesforce Einstein. And the premise of that is being able to model with clicks and not code. So you can actually go in and kind of choose which object, which area of your ERP system you want to do the analytics on. And they'll lead you through with just a series of clicks and options. And at the end, they'll help you implement your model across your entire system. So you don't need a programmer. You still, in my opinion, should still use somebody familiar with data science because the implications of the model are important. You need to make sure you understand them. But it makes it much easier to implement analytics on something where you don't have to worry about scaling it. Salesforce does that for you. And you don't really have to worry about having some large program that you're constantly going to have to run. Some other things, if you do have a data scientist on staff, some other really cool areas that you can look at are Python. You can implement models in Python, and the great thing about Python is that it's free. So it's not going to cost you, whereas something like maybe some of you probably heard of SAS. They have a big analytics module in SAS. It's super expensive, extremely expensive for businesses, whereas Python is completely free. You just need somebody who can go in and code. So it'll take, depending on the route that you want to take, there are different technologies available depending on the talent that you have on your staff. If you have a data scientist, you can roll this stuff out using free programming platforms. Otherwise, it might take a little more of an investment in like an ERP system or a CRM.
Yeah, I agree with Sky. One more thing, some more things I want to add on. It's not exactly technology, but like some platform they might help. It's like let's say if you do have a data set and you do not really know what to do with it, like you want to do something with it, but like it's not decided yet. I believe you can collaborate with some other, let's say like the lab, like where Sky was working in, or like some university or the research group within any university or the college. They might create some projects based on the data set and figure out something and help you make the decision based on that. That's something I was trying to add on. Nancy, you mute yourself.
I apologize. I have another question about data cleaning. Can you explain just a little bit more about, I think I'm getting the idea of what data cleaning is, but can you explain maybe a little bit more?
Yeah, do you want me to start with this one or would you like it?
Yeah, I can start. So I would say data cleaning, usually when you collect data, you might have a lot of noise on that. So let's say, you just collect as much as you can, as more as you can. But when you're actually using that, I say, you probably only need several parameters. So the one is you do need to clean the data to keep your focus on, or keep your eye on based on your objective of what set of data you need to use. And also, clean some of the outliers, clean some of the things based on like the special situation. That will be some type of things we do. I still remember we have done one like small project before. I mean, when I was working on my degree. So that database is like not a very huge data set, but it's based on like the bike rental, the number of bike rental, across in different days, and they provide the weather, then the temperature, the humidity, a lot of the stuff. But when you are working on the data set, you want to train the data set and try to get a model based on that to for a cost, let's say the number of a bike rental for like a specific date, right? Then at that time, you do need to clean the data because not all of the things you're gonna need. So that's something I would like to share. What about Sky?
Yeah, things like missing data. Sometimes, when when users are inputting data, they can just maybe skip a step, and you've got missing data that you need to go back and fix. Jinger mentioned outliers. That's something it can come from just fat fingering your keyboard. Maybe you type in a 3 and you meant to type in a 9 or something like that. That stuff happens all the time during data collection. So by cleaning the data, it basically just means looking at your data and making sure that you have the most accurate data possible. You're avoiding user input errors. You've got standard processes. The easiest way to keep your data set clean is to standardize the process when your data is being input into the system. So things like Dropboxes are super helpful. It's very hard to mess up something that's a Dropbox. You can just go in and click it, as opposed to maybe a text field where users can go in and type a paragraph. That's going to be something that's harder to analyze than a Dropbox where you just go in and select a pre-filled option. So the more that you can standardize your data, that's what's important about cleaning data, making it standard, so that every user is entering the information in the exact same way.
And also, I believe once when you collect the data, some of the data are like a qualitative data. Some of them are quantitative data. So sometimes you might need to do some process based on that to, like what Sky mentioned, to standardize all the data format. That is also one step there.
Okay, we have time for one more quick question, and it is, what do you foresee in terms of data analytics in the next 5 years? We only have a couple minutes.
I would say that's like everybody doing analytics. So like what I mentioned in the slides, especially now, not only people who are running business, they are doing analytics, who are, the receiver, right, of the receiver side, they are analyzing stuff as well. So I would say the thing is like within the next 5 years, everybody gonna start working on analytics. Everybody gonna start doing analytics. Then there will be like more strategic, more like organized all the decisions making processes. That's what I observe, just in a sentence.
Yep. I'll add to that really quickly. I agree with Jinger, and I think the past, I'll say 10 to 15 years, most companies have bought into the fact that they need to upgrade their technology and things like that. And so now what we're seeing is a lot of companies actually have that data stored up and they're ready to do something with it. They just don't know what to do. So I think you're going to see two things. One, I think you're going to see more CRM and ERP systems integrating this functionality into their product. Just like now, most ERP systems have dashboards available. Most CRMs, you can go in and do dashboards. That wasn't true 50 years ago. And so 30 years ago even. And so that's become something that's integrated in now in almost all ERP and CRM systems. And I think analytics is going to be the next piece that really gets integrated into that technology. And then the other thing quickly that I think you're going to see is a big shortage. It's already here, but it's going to continue to get worse. A big shortage of data science talent. So if you find somebody that has that talent, keep them around. And if you can hire consultants. There's several different things you can do to implement these kind of strategies. But I do think there's going to be some big competition to get the talent in to help companies complete some of these projects.
That's exactly what we are working on, right?
Yeah, well, great. Thanks, Jinger and Sky. This wraps it up for today's Herd Insight Small Business webinar. We want to announce our next webinar that will be on February 15th. In celebration of Black History Month, it will host Dr. George Wright, Distinguished Research Professor, Senior Advisor to the President, and Interim Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of Kentucky, and President Emeritus from Texas A&M Prairie View. Dr. Wright will speak on the economic status of Afro-Americans in the 21st century. He will speak in conversation with Dr. Nabanita Biswas, Assistant Professor of Economics here at Marshall. Look for your registration email to arrive shortly. Please share the email with anyone you know who might benefit from the event. We appreciate your participation today, and always remember, we are Marshall.